One of the lessons we've learned, and this is one that probably comes very naturally to all of you, is what makes up an interface. And I have up here an example of an app that does a food delivery. And there are huge numbers of apps in this space, right? There are many competitors in the United States. If you travel around the world, you'll also find many such apps in the countries you visit. And the whole idea is that you're replacing what used to be a human interaction by going to a restaurant or calling people at a restaurant to get food and deliver it to you with an app that does it for you. You just select your food and it magically arrives at your door. And what happens though with an interface like this if you remove the words? There's very little interface left, right? There's almost nothing there. And so that's something that we've been focused on in the world of designing for traditional interfaces. We've realized that language is a pretty critical part of what makes an interface useful and usable, right? So that same approach is what we're applying to this type of work. Really, it's taught us that design, in general, is all about the words, right? For digital products, we cannot have a usable experience without the words. At Allstate, we are aligned with a certain business unit, and this business unit is responsible for supporting our customers. So that means that they are managing all the call centers, they are trying to work out how we support customers through digital products like our mobile app, like our websites and different digital touch points, and they're also trying to automate a lot of processes that have been manual for a very long time. So this is the perspective we're coming from with this talk, so it'd be especially relevant to you if you work in a big organization or work with a big organization to sort of take these learnings, and we're just hoping that our approach will be a benefit to you. When we think about designing one of these experiences, we want to focus on three things. Number one is that it's useful. So you can have something that's very usable, that second item, but it may not be very useful. And what I mean by that is it has to be something someone needs, something that provides value in their life. So what we've learned for these automated systems, for things that are automated conversations like IVRs and chatbots, it's very important that these systems solve a problem for the user. Sounds simple, but not always as straightforward as it sounds, right? Then they also do need to be usable, right? We need to make sure that the interface is simple and straightforward and easy for users to interact with, that they feel in control. And on top of that, we want to make sure that they're accessible so that everyone who is using a system like this has equal opportunity to be supported and to have their problems solved. So let's get back to the topic of this talk. And the topic of this talk came from an offhand comment that one of our executives made in a meeting. And this executive was articulating, I think, what every executive's dream is, that we do the work once in one place, and then we could just magically replicate it out to every other channel. So this person said, we've already done this, we've already created this conversation for chat, can we just use it for voice as well? Can we just use the same design, same code, everything like that? And it sounds great in theory, it sounds really exciting. But those of us who are on the implementation side know that land of rainbows and happy times isn't so easy to come by, right? There are a lot of unique considerations that go into each channel. So as tempting as it was to just say, no, you can't do that. What I said was, let's talk about how that would work, and let's explore it together. And this talk is a culmination of that exploration. Is there a way that we could actually take advantage of some of the work one team has done around creating a certain intent or something like that, and then transfer that over to another team? So I said, let's talk about how that would work, but honestly, I was a little bit nervous. I wasn't really sure how we would explain this or what would go on as we worked further down this road. But as we think about it, it makes sense what this person was thinking. It was hard for me to visualize it at first, but again, this person was thinking we could save a lot of time and we could save a lot of money. Our organization is big, and we have a lot of smart people here working on these problems. Let's use our time effectively, right? So if we could leverage some work one team has done, then it'd be great benefit to the rest of the company. We could have a lot of efficiency and good things coming out of it. So again, I should mention, the systems we work on are very different. Katie's team is working in the IVR space. My teams are working on chatbots that appear in websites or in mobile apps, things like that. So reconciling the differences between those two channels was going to be the challenge. We've got a quote here, and this is from Sarah Wachter-Becher in her book, Content Everywhere. And what she says is that we need content that can be reused across different outputs, yet that feels not just in its medium, but of its medium everywhere it goes. And I think as people, I'm speaking to folks in the implementation track here, we understand the importance of that, right? We understand that when the rubber meets the road, in the particular channel, in the particular touch point, the experience needs to be a good one. So how do we do that? One thing to point out is that this quote came, that this book was released in 2012. And so that's really before things like Alexa and Siri became mainstream. She was describing mainly content that lives in a CMS and how it could be put into other channels like that. But to me, it's interesting that it's just as applicable to this world where we're talking about these different types of conversational interfaces. So we're going to talk about how to unify your conversational interfaces. We want to make 3 points. One is that you should find your shared ground. So Katie's going to walk through that and how we can collaborate as teams to find what's common between us and leverage that. Another thing is that we want to share our understanding. Understanding the problem is many times so much more important than the final implementation itself. That's where we understand whether something is going to actually be useful for the customer or the end user. And finally, we want to talk about designing and creating these conversations together in a way that's collaborative across a large organization with different teams doing different things. So to talk us through the next section, I'm going to pass it over to Katie.
Thanks, Michael. You guys can hear me, I trust? Okay. And I share in Michael's sentiment. It's so great to be here. This is my first time at Speech Tech and just having a great time learning from everyone. And I hope you guys get something from our presentation too. So as Michael kind of alluded to at the upfront here, while we believe that voice and chat experiences shouldn't in the end really share the exact same words, we do really feel that there are certain parts of the design process that can and should be shared across channels. And we say that not just because sharing is innately good, it's a good thing to do, but also because we believe this coming together on certain activities is going to help unify different conversational experiences. And as mentioned, the first step there is really coming together and finding your shared ground. And if I'm being honest, depending on where you work, if you work at a place like Allstate, which is just incredibly large, finding that shared ground might be the hardest step of all. Like coming up and popping up from your little project tunnel, as our prairie dog is doing here, that may be the most difficult step in the process. So what I'm going to share with you now is the story of how Michael and I came together to find our shared ground. So at a really surface level, the projects he and I were working on were really different. For one, again, we were working on different channels. Him on chat, a capability that was new to the organization. Myself on IVR, something that had been around for a while. We had entirely different project teams, different dev leads, different product owners, stand-up meetings at different times of the day to accommodate different time zones. And there was also kind of different urgencies and different messages we were getting from our stakeholders about how quickly things need to be done and kind of how important things were in the organization. And one day, Michael and I were talking by the water cooler, and of course I mean by that we were going over instant messaging. I think it was Slack at the time. And we were having a conversation about something that I had brought up in a meeting recently that I was beginning to work on, and being kind of a new employee, he had asked me about something that I knew a fraction of something about. So I was very excited to share with him something that I knew about one of the use cases that he was designing for. And so kind of after a few exchanges and going back and forth, we realized that, yes, we were working on different projects and different products, but at the core, there were two main things that were really similar. One was that we had the same user goals, and that was for our customers to get the right help the first time. The second one was that we had the same business objectives, and that was to improve the service for our users. And this was a little bit of an aha moment for us. And building on the energy of that aha moment, Michael did something that I can only be grateful for in hindsight. He invited me to a meeting, and this meeting was to critique his chat designs. Now, of course, I say I was grateful in hindsight because I don't think anyone wants an additional meeting on their calendar at any point in time, and let alone this was a recurring meeting. And at the time, it was the summer, and this meeting was on a Friday afternoon. And despite all those hesitations and all the kind of inertia I had to fight to say no to this invite, I eventually did say yes, and I popped up from my own tunnel. And from the beginning, it was clear from that first meeting that there were a lot of things that we would be able to share, and the work would strengthen each of our projects. So even in a case like ours, I guess my point that I'm trying to drive home here is that even when all signs point to in your project you being super special or things being super different, a reminder is that other people in your organization have the same goals and the same users as you do, and you'll do well to occasionally pop up and find them. So next I'm going to talk a little bit about what happens when you do pop up. So what do you share beyond sharing that common ground or having something in common? What I want to talk through next are a few of the artifacts that Michael and I have shared with one another. And this is all around a fairly common use case, one that I feel comfortable talking about at a conference, and that's customers getting help logging into an Allstate application. And when I say share here, like share the understanding, it's not sharing in the sense of doing something at the exact same time as someone else. It's not sharing in the carpool sense where you're traveling through space and time to a shared destination. It's more sharing in the sense of leaving a trail of breadcrumbs for someone. If you've gone down a certain path and you think someone might come down that path at a later time, you want to leave something a little bit behind to help them along. And to give a little bit of framing to the artifacts that we shared, I want to talk for a minute about the double diamond, which is the visual you see here up on the slide. For those unfamiliar with it, the double diamond is a creative approach to solving problems. And a lot of organizations that are focused on human-centered design use a process that looks, fairly similar to this. The British Design Council are often the ones who are credited with coming up with this approach. And in this rendering, there's 2 diamonds, 4 quadrants. The first one, or the first quadrant of each diamond, I should say, is really focused on, you're really diverging. You're thinking big, you're going broad, you're having all the big ideas. So in Discover and Design, that's the whole purpose. In the second quadrant, your thinking begins to diverge and come to a point. So in Design and Develop, again, you're really narrowing it down and coming to that point. After the first diamond, your point is a definition of the problem that you're trying to solve. And the point after the second diamond is the solution that you plan to deliver. Let's see. And with all due respect to the British Design Council, this is very much a simplified statement of what is happening with the double diamond. And the first one, you're really focused on understanding and making sure that you're designing the right thing. The second diamond, you're focused on creating, making sure you're designing the thing right. So the activities that I'm going to cover are for this first diamond here, and they are going to be digging into in real life conversations, mapping the customer journey, assessing and doing a little bit of evaluation of whether a bot or an automated conversation is right, and then also sharing the user story. And I'm using user story here in the proper agile sense of that term. So as Michael said in the upfront, we both worked on the variety of digital projects, and a common starting point for these projects is taking a look around at what other people have done. If you're designing that meal delivery service app, you're probably going to go out and check out what's happening in the market and see what other people have done, see what's working, and make some assessments on your own of, what's not working so well. And at Allstate, as Michael mentioned, he and I are lucky enough to work in the business unit that's responsible for providing support to customers and employees and agents. And as people who are designing conversations, we can have no better resource than to look at the people who are having in real life conversations every single day. And regardless of whether these reps are on the phone with someone or behind a live chat, and listening to them and watching them, we can really see how their questions and the questions they ask sort of drive the conversation forward and really move things forward. Listening in also helps us gain the empathy of the customer. We can hear the way the customer is talking, like what they're saying, what their responses are, and the likely questions that the customers have along the way, which, as we know, sometimes aren't really captured in the call reason ultimately, or kind of the end of call notes. So going back to this use case of helping customers log in, I know that I had the mindset before I started on this project that it would just be simple enough. Someone would call in, they would say they needed their password reset, the rep would send out that email to reset the password, and that would sort of be the end of it. But again, as I sat down and listened to them, I understood that some of the reps, like the ones that had this really great kind of first call resolution mindset, they did something a little bit different. And that was that they often made sure that the customer knew what their user ID was, or made sure that they knew how to get it. They knew that this was an important part of the equation, that they didn't just want to respond to exactly what the customer said. The other thing that made these conversations really successful was when the rep acknowledged that this was a really transactional kind of call, that it wasn't necessarily the place to suggest that there was a survey they could take to report back on their performance, or maybe it wasn't the time to ask if they wanted a policy review or to kind of like cross-sell another product. They understood that this was transactional and the customer is trying to do something, as we heard during the keynote this morning, like customers want to do self-service, and this was bringing them back to being able to do that. Whoop, just sit up. So overall, our chance to see the in real life reps made us understand that this could be a good pattern, not just for an in real life conversation, but also for an IVR conversation and for a chat conversation. So when Michael started working on the same use case, I shared this pattern with him as well to take into account for chat. Another process and artifact that we found worthy of sharing between conversational projects is a customer journey map. We take it kind of as a given within our large organizations that processes and process maps and system diagrams, these things all exist as a way to define kind of the processes and technologies within an organization. And I like to think of a customer journey map as a way to say what's going on with the people part of that equation, what's going on for the customers who are engaging with these processes. And just reading out the definition here, a customer journey map is a visualization of the process that a customer goes through in order to accomplish a goal. It takes into account not only their actions, so what they're doing, but also their mindset, what they're thinking, and what they're feeling. And so we know we want to be able to share this so that we kind of create empathy between and across project teams for the current state experience. It also helps us think beyond a touch point. So just like process maps, customer journey maps can really fly at different levels. You can think of mapping the customer experience in terms of 15-minute increments, or you could think of mapping it in terms of 15-second increments. And when Michael started on his project on designing this for chat, we had a customer journey map, but if I'm being honest, like it really wasn't that good. It didn't get down into the level of detail that we needed in order to feel that empathy for what the customer was doing in those self-service moments. So what Michael did was he brought together a team of people, a really cross-functional group of folks. It was the reps in the call center, it was the people on his product team, dev leads, product owners, also reps in the call center to more clearly and in more detail map out what the journey is. And this will be a little bit easier to read if you access the slides later. I apologize for that. But it gave him a really clear idea of how the chatbot could actually provide value. And that is to help sort of in this last little bit of things where people are trying over and over again in our self-service channels to try to log in. The bot could come in and sort of like recognize that something is going on in that space and help them before they needed to reach out to us and provide help. So Michael went and did this amazing detailed journey map, and then he shared it back with me. And the real talk is that we already had an IVR solution in place for this, and it didn't take into account this lovely detailed journey map. And while it didn't influence kind of that initial release of the IVR, I know that it can and it will help us focus our tuning efforts. And just a personal lesson learned here is that understanding is not just a tidy thing, and yes, I showed it in a diamond beforehand, but it doesn't have bounds like that. I think in order to be effective and to truly perform in an organization, you have to be open to taking understanding at wherever it comes and at whatever time it comes. So my learning here is that I'm going to do well to continue to stay open and learn from those new insights. So the next thing we want to talk about here is assessing whether or not a conversation is right. So at some point during your conversation design project, you're going to make an assessment as a team about whether a conversational interface is really in the realm of possibility as a solution for you, and whether it'll be a good customer experience, whether you'll get a good return on investment, and whether even part of the conversation or the whole of the conversation can even be automated. And normally these decisions kind of take place in a vacuum, in a tunnel, in the scope of your own project. And what we're suggesting to you here, no surprise by now, is that we believe that these assessments should be shared a little bit more broadly in the organization across different project teams. And efficiency in this case is certainly a compelling reason to share, so that people don't kind of maybe repeat the same mistakes that you did or have to go and do the same learnings you did. But sharing your assessment, it opens up discussions about what is right for a conversational interface and what may not be right for a conversational interface, kind of what the benefits and the burdens are of those systems. And because we know that one team's yes may be another team's no, we wanted a way to sort of complete an assessment that was a little bit more objective than subjective. We know that Google, and I'm sure others since I've last looked, have assessments out there that help designers determine whether conversation is the right fit for a solution. And what we're showing you here is just a little bit of an enterprise twist on that Google model that's already out there. Again, geared more towards large organizations and perhaps even more support circumstances. So you want to ask yourself, do reps talk about this topic or intent with customers currently? Can the topic be something that's covered in a few turns? Is it efficient for the reps to do? And is the topic covered in the same way? Is this a repeatable process, or is this something where reps really have to improvise and do something different each time? And also, do users have trouble finding information about this topic elsewhere? Is this kind of a closed private thing, or is there a lot of information out there in the world about that? And then also, would the bot be able to tap into the same systems and the same data and the info that reps have to provide an answer? Or is that data behind a system that's kind of closed off and not something you can tap into? So going through the checklist and answering these questions for our login assistance use case, we determined that getting help through an automated conversation would be a right fit. Basically, the only box we didn't have fully checked was that there is other information about this use case out on our sites and such, but we know that customers still have problems, so let's help them in that case. So the last understanding method I'm going to share with you is really quick and simple, and it's about user stories. So in the Agile framework, user stories are a way to represent requirements in terms of what customers need, instead of expressing those requirements as what the solution is going to do or how the solution is going to behave. And what we're suggesting here is that you can write the first part of the user story independent of the acceptance criteria in a way that's sort of like independent of the technical solution. And the reason we suggest that you do that is to reinforce the user focus throughout your project, across projects, and throughout the organization. So we're just going to take a quick look at an example of the difference. This first one here, we have a user story that has let the solution creep into it. We're saying, as a customer using chat, I want help logging into my account so that I can do something. Here we're saying pay my bill. Just making one small edit to this, crossing out using chat, we can see we've made this user story universal so that I can pick it up and use it for IVR. I can imagine some of our colleagues who are working on the online application could also take this and use this as well. At the core, our users are all having the same needs here. So just to summarize kind of the purpose of sharing your understanding activities, Yes, you are going to gain some efficiencies when you share kind of high-level models of your conversation and when you share your journey maps and your insights from listening in. That's all going to make you more efficient. And of course, it feels good to share. Like, that feels good to not just kind of like stay in your own tunnel, but to pop up and kind of look out every once in a while. But the ultimate benefit of sharing is a shared understanding of the problem across channels, and that gives us a better chance to meet user needs. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Michael.
Thanks, Katie. So I just want to talk you through, as we complete this journey, how implementation works in this scenario. And I mentioned that at the beginning our concern was that it didn't seem like implementation could be exactly the same for both of these channels. And that's true. But what we did find is that a unified approach saves time, provides a strong experience, but each channel has those unique needs we described. So let's talk about getting there. I want to go back to the double diamond approach that Katie introduced earlier, and we're going to be in that second diamond now for this part. And it's important to point out that in a big organization like ours, where we have teams working on IVR, teams working on chat, this second diamond is going to be happening within each team. We're going to be designing and doing this work individually and independently. But we do still want to be synced up and unified, again, in our approach. Some of the methods I want to call out for creating a good experience are making sure that you get alignment on the vision with everyone who's involved, making sure that you design the conversations together, and iterating through the technical constraints that you might have so that you get to a good experience in the end. I want to give you a quote from Jared Spool. I know this is a really long quote, but Jared Spool's whole idea is that design is the rendering of intent. And what this really means is that as someone with designer in my job title, it really doesn't matter what I want the design to be. What matters is what the user ends up interacting with at the end of the day. And so Jared's idea is to democratize the design process. And he says here, this last sentence, this implies the role of the designer shifts from owning the design outcome to educating all the other designers on the team on how to best render their own intentions. And what this means is that I need to view our product owner as a designer. I need to view our engineering team as designers. I need to view our subject matter experts as designers, maybe even our legal team as designers. All of those people are they're creating the final experience that our customers interact with. And so bringing them along on the journey ends up being just as important as what I put into the diagram that shows the logic and everything like that. So I do that through visibility. Visibility into our work creates a shared understanding and eventually shared rationale that we can all believe in. So some of these are really just simple things. Here is a canvas that I use, and I fill this out with my teams. So how many of you have ever been to a meeting and feeling like you're all on the same page, and then you come back to the next meeting and you're not anymore? Yeah, this was a common problem for me, and especially when we've already done all this hard work around understanding the problem to begin with, we really want to make sure we leverage that understanding, because making sure we solve the right problem is key to these experiences. So this canvas ended up being a quick way. I would just put this up on my screen, and as I shared it with our team, and fill it out together, and then we'd all be able to talk about these points together and make sure we understand the user needs, the task, the business goals, any certain principles that we wanted to incorporate into the experience. Here's another really similar worksheet that I also use. And I use this one to highlight the design process. Again, we're leveraging that double diamond idea. So again, you see those design problem, user need, business goals, things on the left that capture the basics. But then over on the right, we have our double diamonds out here where we can start to fill in what we've done to understand the problem and what we're doing to design the solution. And I really just use this as kind of design theater so that if we get to the point where we're building a solution and we realize we haven't done a whole lot to understand the problem, that should be a red flag to us as the team. We need to go back and make sure we understand what's going on, because we don't want to spend a lot of time and energy solving the problem when we don't have confidence that we're doing it the right way. One other thing I do with teams is get everyone involved in critique. And so I know sometimes in the design world, critique can feel like a designer-only process. And in fact, I think if you Google images of design critique, you'll see lots of people in hipster clothing in exposed brick offices with lots of glass everywhere, pointing at things that are hung up. And sure, that's one way you can do critique. But what I try to do is involve everyone on the team together and help them get a vision for what critique means. So here's a screenshot of what my screen looks like during a critique session. It might be a little bit difficult to read these guidelines, but it's really key that we share an understanding of what we're all getting out of critique. So I'll invite our business analysts, our product manager, our engineers, and we're gonna go through it together and critique it as if we're all designers, because we are. One of the important guidelines that I always point out to people is this third bullet, speak from objectives. So one phrase that I ban from our critiques is the phrase, I don't like that. If someone says, I don't like that, we always have to dig into why. What are you talking about in particular? You know, how does your not liking this affect our objectives or the user needs in this case? So again, like, it's not terribly important whether you like it or not. What's important is whether it meets the user needs and whether it does it well. So bringing the teams along in this process helps them all feel like they own the design outcome and like they have a stake in the process and like their concerns are addressed. Finally, again, this is that shared flow that Katie established through all her incredible discovery work. And so then we were able to start to believe in this because she shared this valuable information with us. So this is the same approach that we're using for chat and voice, but how does it play out in implementation? I'll walk you through a couple of examples. So these are not the precise interface, but this is just meant to be illustrative of how these things turned out, as well as I can in PowerPoint. So the IVR says, it sounds like you need help logging in. Is that correct? The customer will say yes. So we're doing some intent recognition there at the beginning, and then it'll say, to help you get logged in, I can email you your user ID, password, or both. So this is what the IVR experience is going to look like, but we can do the same process and the same approach a little differently in chat, and there are good reasons why. So as Katie mentioned earlier, the bot is integrated with the system that the user is trying to log into, and it can detect if they're having trouble logging in. So maybe on their third try, when they're getting an error message, the bot could offer to help, right? And in that sense, we don't really need to do that same type of intent recognition. We can do it via natural language, but we can also have some confidence that right now the user is struggling with logging in. And so the bot can say, it looks like you're having trouble logging in. I can help you recover your user ID or password, which you need help with. And then we also have quick reply buttons in chat that we don't have in a voice interface that allow the user to see what options are available for them in terms of utterances that will help move them along this path. One other example is near the end of the flow. So the IVR says, okay, I've sent your user ID to your gmail.com address. If you don't get it, give us a call back. Whereas on the chat side, it can say, okay, I've sent your user ID to your gmail.com address. And then after a short delay, the bot can jump in and ask, was I able to resolve your issue? Because presumably they still have that window open, they're still trying to log in. They've gone out to get the link from their email. And then if they select yes, we are able to collect some valuable data around the usefulness of this intent. And if they select no, then they can be escalated to a live rep who can help resolve the issue. So that's how it plays out in the end. So for our executive at the beginning of the talk, the answer is not straightforward, right? But there are some things we can share. Again, find your shared ground. Other people in your organization have the same goals and users as you. You should find them. You can share the understanding because shared understanding gives us the best chance to meet user needs. And then finally, a unified approach is going to save you some time, and it's going to provide a strong experience, but each channel has its own unique needs, and it's worth paying attention to those needs so that you can solve the problem well. Thank you so much for being here and listening, and I just want to mention that here's the link again if you want to get to the slides. We're so grateful that you took the time to be here. We also have links on that at that link where you can find the books we referenced and the other articles and techniques we referenced as well. So thank you once again. Any questions? Right here.
Were you able to share the technology or the back end at all?
Katie says not right now.
Yeah, I think that where we're at with our systems right now, like they don't interface. There's talks of someday, like, yeah, sharing the technology, but we're not there right now.
When you say sharing the technology, let me make sure I understand what you mean. Are you saying like saying what we're using? Is that?
Essentially, the kind of, you know, you're talking about the interaction points and the pivots and those pieces, so you're,
Yeah.
Separate two systems.
yeah, the intents and all those things, and the answers.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in there. Yeah. We can talk in more detail and I'll see what I could share with you later if you're interested. Yes.
You gave some examples there where in the chat channel you give an options, assuming that those are all the options, and you're basically dropping into a kind of a touch tone style interface or a dad website interface. If the person wants to say something like, "I'm pretty sure I have the right password," do you accept continuing natural language interaction, or are you really dropping them down into a visual interface at that point?
So that's a great question. The question is, when we have those quick reply buttons for chat, is that limiting it and kind of making it a touch tone IVR style interface? What we found in our research is that users really benefit from having the option to click buttons like that allow them to propel themselves forward, but they also use natural language to express, like you just said, what their need is. So we support both. We want to make sure we support that shortcut, if possible, but also support a natural language interaction.
Box there that implies to them they can keep typing.
Yes, yeah. Any other questions? There was another one around here. Maybe I'm wrong. Okay, thank you all so much. We're happy to talk further about this if you need us.